Welcome to the Behind the Girl Boss podcast, where every woman's journey takes center stage. Join us in this safe space as we explore the ins and outs of business, career, mental health, the music industry, and more. Whether you're a go-getter or a dream chaser, we've got stories for you. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok for an exclusive backstage pass. Get ready to be inspired, empowered, and entertained. Welcome to the ride. Hey everyone, what is up? And welcome back to the podcast. Welcome to Behind the Girl Boss. This is my first intro before a guest episode where I'm filming on camera. I'm still getting used to it. It's a lot. I feel like it's so weird because I do this for YouTube. So why am I so awkward in front of the camera right now? But I feel like it's just a whole different platform, different beast, whatever you want to call it. But yes, hello. If you're watching this on YouTube or on Spotify, you can see my video. I feel like the room looks a little bit blue, but that could also just be me, or it could be the fact that I don't have glasses on. I can't actually see anything, and I just look like a pale beast with dark hair. But yeah, welcome to the podcast. When you're listening to this, it's actually January 16th, which is insane that we're in January, that we're in 2024. This is just mind-boggling to me. I don't understand how the year of 2023 passed by so fast. I remember being in my house for New Year's Day in 2023, like January 1st, 2023, and now we're literally in January 2024. It's wild to me, but nonetheless, this year is gonna be a good year for the podcast. I can feel it in my bones, in my body, my blood. It's gonna be a good year. I probably said this in the first episode that went up, that was a solo, but I really wanted to kind of bring more to the podcast and kind of elevate it a bit. And I feel like a lot of people do listen to podcasts audio only, but there has been a big shift for visual content. And I can't have a studio and anything because no, first of all, no one lives in Montreal. So there's not a lot of people to have on the podcast here. A lot of them are virtual. But I was at first I was oh, I don't want to put Zoom videos up, but I was you know what? Who cares? And then if I'm in person with people, I can do a studio video type of thing and just keep the video content consistent. So we're doing video now. I hope you guys like it. I do have to say that when I look at myself, when I'm listening to someone talk, I literally look like either one I'm uninterested or I have a resting bitch face. But it's just me concentrating and my ADHD kind of kicks in sometimes. So I really try to make myself concentrate and you could tell in the videos that's how I look. I'm gonna work on it, but don't make fun of me. But yeah, anyways, long intro. We're still gonna do our little mantra. So today's mantra is act like the person you want to become. I saw this and I was like, you know what? It's a new year. I want to be the best version of myself. I want to grow. I want to just be happy with myself. So I saw this and I was like, perfect. So act like the person you want to become. Everyone needs to do this. Today on the podcast, we have Sophie Jones. Sophie is a business and mindset coach, and she has such a deep, vulnerable story that she shared with us on the podcast. She was a victim of human trafficking, and she was very much in that world. And she spoke about her experiences in it and her story about it. So there is a trigger warning for human trafficking and alcoholism. We dove deep into it. We talked about trauma. We talked about alcoholism. We talked about getting sober. We talked about how she worked in real estate and kind of overworked herself. And then we talked about her kind of shift into business and mindset coaching and just how she preserves her mental health nowadays. It was a very, very insightful and much needed conversation, and it kind of opened the door to a lot of different things. So if you guys are interested in listening to her story, let's get into it. Hey everyone, what's up and welcome back to the podcast. So today we have Sophie with us. So hi Sophie.
Hey.
Do you want to start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do?
Yeah, I would love to. So my name is Sophie Jones. I'm a business mentor along with a leadership and mindset mentor, and I'm also certified in breathwork. And I work with more experienced entrepreneurs, professionals, and creatives, and helping them develop success from the inside out and kind of let go of those habits that they picked up along their success journey, which I say those are survival based habits, so that they
Mhm.
can be a more fully aligned and satisfied leader within whatever role they are going and wanting to really elevate skill set at.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive into all that with you. But before I do that, I like to do a little hot seat segment to kind of just break the ice and know little fun facts. Um, So the first one is if you could pick up and move anywhere, where would it be?
So this is fun. I've lived in 8 states.
Okay.
So I've had, like, the opportunity to really have, like, variety. I think
Yeah.
I would live somewhere over in Spain or Portugal. I've never been,
Hmm.
but I'm definitely got a gypsy heart, so I'd go somewhere over there.
No, I love that. The next one is do you have a life mantra or motto that you live by?
Yeah, I feel like this changes over the seasons with wisdom, but I really firmly believe, like, turn your mess into your message. It does no good
Hmm.
to hide behind things that have happened, and it
Yeah.
empowers all of us to really own who we are.
Yeah. And I think also like sharing what you've been through
Yeah.
like attracts other people to you and makes people feel less alone and
Mhm.
like relatable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last one is who's a celebrity or creator that always keeps you inspired?
So, I'm a super nerd for documentaries, like, I'm
Hmm.
a weirdo about it, and so I was thinking about this. And I'm always studying successful people. And so there's not one, but like you'll catch me watching Chef's Table, you'll catch me watching Shark's Tank, you'll catch me watching I love watching people that have overcome their own stories. And so I just like anyone, athletes, coaches, like I own the the masterclass series.
Yes.
Like I'm geeking out over all of those people. So I don't have one person in like that I would say, "Oh my gosh, you're my guiding light." But I
Hmm.
would say anyone that has just come in and like really owned their path unapologetically and done it in a big way inspires me huge.
No, I love that. I agree too. Um, Talking about like documentaries and stuff like that, I feel like social media is kind of like our own
Yeah.
sort of documentary outlet. And you do share a lot of your life online. So what's something that you do for fun that people may not know that you actually do?
Okay. So Um, I just recently went through a divorce, but I was married to someone who was extremely outdoorsy.
Mhm.
So, like, a big outdoorsman. So we would go like hunting all over the world. We'd go fishing all over the world. So your girl loves a good like down and dirty adventure. Like I'm with the best of them when people are like, I don't think I'd want to do that. I'm like, let's go. So anything that relates, I don't want to do it all the time. That
Mhm.
was like part
Yeah,
of the thing. But I'm 100% like, oh, we're gonna go live on a fishing boat. Like in the ocean for 5 days, I'm there. So, I would say
love
that
that.
I don't really share a lot of that, like, on my social where people would be like, "You really?" But I enjoy stuff like that all the time.
Super cool. So growing up, did you always envision yourself in the kind of career path that you're in now, or was it like something totally different?
Yeah. So, I'm from Utah, and I think
Mhm.
it's important to preface that because the Mormon church is here, and so it's interesting, it's like it's interesting to be from a place where so much of a society is built around a religion. And so a lot of it is get married young, have babies young, like, so there's
Yeah.
not a lot of like, what do you wanna do when you grow up? And from a very young age, my mom was a model, my dad was a criminal and family attorney. So I was like 7, like, I'm gonna be like, Elizabeth Taylor and have like 7 husbands. Like, I always wanted like I don't know, I wanted a big life.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily, like, have a career path, but, I definitely say real estate found me and chose me to go into that, and that was what I did for a long time, and it was just the natural progression. It's like, I think when you're on path and you're in alignment, like, things just keep kind of nudging you down the road, and so
Yeah.
people always asking me like, "Hey, can you coach me in business? Hey, can you coach me?" And I was just not available for that because I was growing my own businesses,
Mhm.
but I can see looking back, like, I was always going to be in some type of growth, like, I was always very driven, and helping others, definitely, like, growth and healing and being there, so, no, I didn't think I'd be doing this,
Mhm.
but it makes perfect sense that I am.
Yeah. And if we go
Yeah.
back to the beginning, you did experience human trafficking. Do you mind letting us into like that story a bit and how this kind of impacted your life?
Yeah, so it's something that I'm starting to get paid to talk about,
Mhm.
in a public forum, like at conventions and different places, and I really feel like it's part of my calling, but,
Yeah.
so I love talking about it. is what I want to say. And I think it's important when people think of human trafficking, they typically don't see a picture of me sitting there. They're like, what? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so it's important that people understand that exploitation of humans and trafficking can happen to really anyone. And so,
Yeah.
um, grab a tea or coffee if you're listening, because I'm going to give you like a 8 to 10 minute monologue, but you'll be able to hear a lot of this. So, if I go way back to when I was a little girl, and this is important when we understand attachment and why I was
Mhm.
kind of like enticed into that world. And my mom wasn't around in my formative years. She was a very young mom, and so we were around my grandparents, and so kind of that loving nurturing wasn't available to me. I have no memories of my mom in that time. And my dad was kind of this like larger than life kind of scary figure. Like I had uncles that we'd go to dinner and it was like some of them were drug dealers and some of them were firemen and everyone was
Mhm.
treated the same. And so I was exposed to different kind of societal norms, and then not being part of the church here, there you're almost shunned, or that's how I felt anyways, I should say,
Yeah.
as a and so I was always hanging out with like the worst kids in the neighborhood. I was boy crazy at a young age. I was like obsessed with drug dealers, anyone that was
Yeah.
making underworld. And that's like very real patterning, looking for somebody to save you at a young
Yeah.
age. There was a lot of abuse when my mom was around. And so as that would play out, um, I always joked I dated Peter Pan or Power, and I dated a like very big drug dealer here in Utah for a long time, and I felt very safe with him, and but I never was into that stuff, and so it was just showing me like, oh, scary, not societal norm people are safe,
Yeah.
and that was also something that was like so. I ended up like, none of my friends were going to school. Most of my friends were in the snowboarding industry. So it wasn't like, everyone was career driven, and I met a guy, and I was a lifty up at Snowbird, and we ended up dating for a few years, and he owned part of a snowboarding company, and we went from Utah to Colorado to Portland. And I always drank and partied super hard. Like always at a young age. I think I had a lot of trauma that I didn't know that I needed to work through. And never was really afraid of like the underworld. Kind of felt like that was almost like, I was going to be like Sharon Stone in Casino. It's like
Yeah.
I never like even though I watched all those mobster movies, it was like the ending is never good, and I was just like always obsessed with like their come up, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so me and this gentleman broke up, and I did what was familiar. And when you learn about trauma and you learn about your nervous system, it just is patterned for what's familiar. This is why women that get out of that life go back to it. This is why, you know, it's like insidious. And so
Mhm.
I broke up with this gentleman, and I was like, oh, there's Portland, like most cities, is, there's certain areas that are, known for certain things. And I didn't know at the time that Portland, Oregon was like one of the number one places in the world, or not in the world, in the country, as a hotspot for trafficking. I had no idea. And so I was going in these neighborhoods where like I'm like, I'm gonna go find a big scary, drug dealer, and just da 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 da
Yeah.
da da. I'm drinking all the time. I'm doing cocaine. And in the week that I met this guy, I lost my job, I got a DUI, and I was getting evicted. And so it was like the perfect storm when you find out about like actually women getting groomed into that
Mhm.
lifestyle. And I met him, and he's like, oh, we started dating, and he would bring beautiful women around that had, jewelry, and,
Yeah.
they're like, it's the oldest profession in the world. And, like, and you're in this desperate place. And that's why they prey on people. That's why, like, especially young girls, you think there's a lot of girls that get into the sex industry some way or one way or another and end up going down this road. And it's wild. And this is where people are like, well, you were an adult, so you were choosing into this, so this isn't trafficking. So where it became different in my situation was about 3 weeks in, I finally agreed to do it. And the next morning I woke up, and he had plane tickets, and he's like, we're going to the East Coast. We lived in Oregon, and he took me away from everyone I know or knew,
Mhm.
and that's when the abuse started. And so it was like a very and even though I experienced abuse at a young age and with my mom who was struggling with alcoholism, who's since been sober for like 20 plus years, it was so different for a man to be
Yeah.
like, and I can see I was just wanting someone to take care of me, and I would have given anything and everything, and I did. And so we were on the East Coast. I learned very quickly a few things, like I'm good with people. Like that world is a
Mhm.
lot more about like the sales aspect of that and making a lot of money is the experience before the act. And so I was open to some good things I'll take from that is like I made a lot of money, more money than I'd ever made. And that's why it's also addictive because it's like,
Yeah.
right. And then but we ended up in Las Vegas and my family, everyone I knew found out about it. And so I was dealing with a ton of shame and my family got with some incredible organizations that like really nurtured and educated them, and they were like, "Something will happen. She's gonna want to come home." Like it's a casebook story, and sure enough, he almost beat me to death, which was crazy. And that same big bad drug dealer that I told you about found out about what was going on, called me like the next day or the day after. I was at the grocery store. No one ever calls me. He like got my number by way of all this kind of divine intervention, and he bought a plane ticket for me to come home,
Mhm.
and I left that life, with the clothes on my back, my face black and blue. There's kind of more to this story, but just for like the Reader's
Yeah.
Digest, right? And I came home and, I was thought I was gonna open up my own escort service. 'Cause that's, like, how you make money,
Yeah.
and, I ended up reaching out to a friend that was very affluent in the snowboarding industry, but also in the stock market, asked him to be an investor who knew all about my story, and he was like, "I'll invest, but you've gotta give me, like, 3 to 6 months," and it was, like, just another divine thing, and he's like, "I'm just gonna start teaching you how I became successful," and his dad was a huge person in real estate that I ended up knowing later on in life, and he had me read like Rich Dad Poor Dad, like Think and Grow Rich, like all of these books. And by the end of that time, he was like, I was obviously, and I had gotten sober.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, that was the first time I tried to get sober. And I was obviously at this point, maybe 6 months in, and I was like, I'm not going to go back to that life. And
Yeah.
and I started down real estate. So yeah, that's how that
Yeah.
about that's full circle. Yeah.
Mhm. Was it hard to, like, leave that life in a sense of, like, did anyone try and find you again
Oh,
from
yeah,
it?
for sure. He
Yeah,
came
okay.
back up to Salt Lake, yep. When I left that day, I left his car at a casino and
Mhm.
cabbed to the airport. There was a police officer that I'm looking back, like, I'm sure a police officer these cops have seen this, like, probably
Yeah.
more than once. So he took because I had to spend the night at the airport, so my flight wasn't till the next morning, and there's so much fear, because that's like a network.
Mhm.
So, like, if you go to another hotel, motel, like, it's wild, and, but yeah, he did end up coming to Utah, and I did actually end up seeing him. So that's what's interesting about trauma and how insidious it is, right? Because it doesn't
Yeah.
have to make sense. It makes sense to your nervous system, right?
Mhm.
So it was super hard, and it was really hard because everyone in my hometown knew about it, like, a lot of that stuff's done online, so, like, people were sharing my profile, and when I came home, I just wanted to crawl in a rock, or,
Yeah.
in a hole, and I was drinking, and I started using drugs a little bit, and then, my mom, I was staying with her, and she was like, "Hey, like, you don't have to live like this," and I'd
Mhm.
watched her in a 12-step program, and so I went to a 12-step program but it's a lot. I mean, I would repeat patterns of
Yeah.
finding big scary people, you know, up until 2018, until I really had a spiritual awakening, found healing in my nervous system and quit drinking for good. One day at a time, if you will. So interesting because it's like you can leave that life, but until you like really get clear on what it is about those characters that
Yeah.
you that entice you, it's hard to really find any sense of peace or alignment.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you started going to real estate after all of that. How was the transition for you for that?
Oh my God, I loved it. So just because I'm I have just been such a worker my whole life. And so the
Mhm.
cool thing about real estate was like you can make a ton of money in real estate based on your work ethic. And I
Yeah.
did the thing. I hired my first business coach at 23. Cold call for sell by when expires. So I sit in open houses and I go to birthday parties. And I was like, I'm not doing any of that. And so I mastered this skill and just became super lethal in that world. And it was like so powerful because went, I started in Utah, then I went to North Carolina, then
Yeah.
I went to Texas in two different places. And people were like, oh my God, you're a prodigy. Like, and it was like, no, I was willing to do the hard thing up front and I had a lot of drive. And it was the first time I think as an adult that I was making way more money than my friends. And it
Yeah.
was also like my discipline was really paying off. So I felt like I could overachieve and outwork my trauma. Like that was like
Yeah.
fire. That was not the case, but I loved, today you couldn't pay me to sell your house, but while I was in it, I loved it.
Mhm. And you mentioned that in 2018 you had a spiritual awakening and then you became sober. How was that process like becoming sober? Because I know you said that you already witnessed your mom going through that. How was it kind of mentally to be like, I'm in that place that I've already seen?
Yeah. So I had tried it before, right? So when I came back
Mhm.
from human trafficking, I'd gone to the same recovery program but I hadn't conceded. And at the end of 2018, so I had like kind of this riding high.
Yeah.
And then at the end of my drinking, I was like overweight. I was dating a guy that had gone to prison for 25 years. It was a huge trafficker for the cartel. It was like, I just was like, what? Like, because it was so different that my brain could not, and I didn't know about trauma yet, like how
Mhm.
it affects. So it was driving me insane because I'm like, I've done all this great stuff and yet I'm still over here. And I was a daily drinker. I was like in psychosis. It was just super stressful. And I don't think I ever related it to my mom because my dad raised me. So my dad and
Okay,
I are
yeah.
much closer. But what I do feel like I did live with my mom for some short periods of time. But what I felt was I was so grateful that I'd seen it work for somebody that I loved so much. And so I didn't have a lot of like beef about going back into the program.
Yeah.
And I was an alcoholic. I was like grateful I knew where to go. And then I knew that it worked if I was willing to get honest and work it.
Mhm. And when did you kind of do the shift from like working in real estate to now being a mindset and business coach? And when did you like, or how did you like kind of find this field? Because it's a little bit different than what you were doing before.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, I always had business coaches.
Hmm.
So, in real estate and sales coaches, 2018, so I get sober, I find breath work, and I met my ex-husband like all within 90 days and I got a
Hmm.
dog. So it was
Love that.
like yeah, we're really having a moment here. And when I found breath work and I started to understand about my nervous system and also my ex-husband had all these hobbies, right? And I just was
Hmm.
like and I was so burnt out on real estate. I was really unhappy.
Yeah.
Um, and people had asked me a lot in real estate. Like I'd have friends that own real estate companies. They'd had me come in and coach how to call. The company I was at had 600 agents. They'd be like, come talk to the new agents, teach them how to call. I mean, I just like, so there had been opportunities, but I was so busy. Like I joke with people, like we have a whole pie, right? But I just lived in like looking bad and bougie, like happy hours that ended in blackouts, like at the gay club, like powerful men and like making money. And like that's where, so it was like when
Hmm.
someone was like, could you help me? I'm like, you're
Doesn't
not,
fit. Yeah.
yeah. So when I kind of went through I had a big eye opening year, 2019. I worked the least I'd ever worked and I made the most money I'd ever made. And I really took care of myself.
Hmm.
And I just felt I really was connecting to my intuition. I was doing a lot of healing and I just knew it was like it was my calling. I just knew it was. And And I didn't know it at the time that I was building a brand. So people
Yeah.
had watched me in real estate. I had shared about my human trafficking thing. And nobody, unless you knew me from Utah, I didn't talk about it for almost 10 years. So people were like, what? Like my
Yeah.
alcoholism, people were like, what? So it gave this idea of, wow, you can be human and you can overcome and you can still have what you want. And I didn't know that was the message I was sending. But in 2020, when I opened up my coaching business, people were like, I want to work with you. So it was just kind of
Mhm.
like a natural progression.
Yeah. So when you opened up your coaching business, how did you go about promoting? Because you did say that like people already said they wanted to work with you. So did it all like come naturally, or did you have to do like a big promotion for it?
It was all social media. And I was just posting. It's kind of like I wish I could go back there and with my innocence because I've spent the last like 3.5 years over consuming what works, what doesn't work, what should be
Yeah.
happening. You know what I mean? Back then, it was like super easy, but I just shared my experience, my thoughts on success, what made me different, why I loved
Mhm.
it. And yeah, people were just, booking discovery calls and hiring me.
So what's a day in the life look like for you right now as a business owner?
Yeah, I'm in a big transition again. I'm in another I 5 years later, my husband and I decided to get a divorce this last year. That was really hard.
Yeah.
I'm moved back home with my dad. I'm getting ready to move back to Texas, but so and I was really, by October of this year, I had a big mastermind, had clients, and my divorce was finalized like all in the same week. My mastermind finalized and just a lot of things. And I
At
just
the same
went
time,
like,
yeah.
I need I was just running on fumes and I didn't really know who I was and I was just
Mhm.
feeling and so right now a day in life for me looks like being in Voxer with my clients, looks like creating content that I like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the sake of like, oh, this is cool. It looks like um coaching calls when I have clients and then it just also looks like, I just came from lunch with my cousin.
Yeah.
Like just enjoying, being back in Salt Lake, and I'm not really in, like, a big build grind, but I am in a place that I've built momentum that I feel like when I turn it back on, but I can't do that prematurely or I
Yeah.
will just feel more stressed, you know?
Mhm. And you were talking a lot about like survival mode before. How do you teach your clients to break free from that and discover like the true fulfillment within them? And yeah,
Uh,
how do you do all that?
well, I think survival I think it's all pretty much the same, but I think it shows up differently, and so you have
Mhm.
to when my clients come to me and they're trying to get their survival-based needs met, like see me, love me, tell me I'm special, tell me I'm appreciated, whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? Um, we start to look at tell me I'm gonna be successful or whatever there's going on, this reassurance of something or whatever needs not being met, they're typically and that was exactly what was happening to me when I was really successful in real estate, and I was also like, there's this big disconnect, right? Like, and then I
Yeah.
was drinking and all these things. So I tried to identify myself like, okay, what needs aren't being met here, but that this person needs. And then I could, talk with people more or less. My clients don't want to come in and be in therapy for 20 years, but
Mhm.
they want someone that's going to give them like action items and also help them process. So a lot of my clients, when they first come to me, it's just me asking very like poignant questions. Like, when did you first notice that? Like, how does that make you feel? Because most of the time my clients are like type A's. So,
Mhm.
and it's me too. So it's like, I was so annoyed to slow down and be like, why do I even have to tell you why, like I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
It's like, what does it mean to be frustrated? Well, this and this and this. Okay, so what so I start to slow people down because when we slow down, we start to feel safe and I start to bring more awareness of the information instead of just grouping things. I'm
Yeah.
anxious, I'm frustrated, I'm depressed. It's like, well, where did you first we so it's finding the story and then it's also identifying and helping them to see like, oh, maybe you're doing that because maybe you're overspending because your need for feeling special in the moment and like you can treat yourself is more important than stability. Where did
Yeah.
so we start to just kind of look at dynamics And then once we have the information of the past, then it's like, who do you wanna be? And I
Mhm.
think because for people that like, you can talk about, I think success comes in 2 things. I can be like, "Okay, Amanda, what are your goals?" And you're like, "I wanna do this, and I wanna make this money, and I wanna da 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 da." I'm like, "That's amazing." And I'm like, "And who do you have to become? Where do you think you are the difference between now and then?" And it's, that next portion, it's really working on, like, who do you wanna become and who do you wanna
Mhm.
not become anymore? And getting clear about that, and then empowering them to do that, and also empowering them through breath work and their nervous
Yeah.
system, and, like, letting them feel safe in a new identity. And so that's really the work I do with clients so that they're like, "Oh, it's not just like say affirmations." It's not like,
Yeah.
talk about healing forever. It's like, "Oh, I'm understanding my own patterns. I'm thought-based, like, here are my goals I wanna achieve." It's like, I wanna be this person in the world and really supporting them in that process.
Mhm. Yeah. And hearing a lot of other people's like sort of struggles or anxieties and stuff, how do you make sure to prioritize and keep your own like mental health in check? Because I know sometimes it can be a little bit difficult just
Mm.
hearing other people's stories and kind of either relating it to your own or just feeling for other people as well.
I didn't do a good job of that this year. I had to learn
It's
going
hard.
yeah, I going through my divorce
Hmm.
and doing that sober, like, not, not
Yeah.
think what was I doing 5 years ago if I had to do this, right? And I traveled a bunch this last year. I did a lot of fun stuff, but it was like I wasn't, like, spiritually, mentally, like, whatever, filling up my own cup and taking care of myself. So now what I've done and what the process that I'm in is really what are my values when somebody's in my coaching container? Because there's a difference
Hmm.
between holding space and dumping.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a victim mentality and an action mentality. And I'm always here. I'm trauma informed. I want to hold space, but you're with
Hmm.
me because we're making a forward movement in progress. And
Yeah.
so, like, that I think some things, especially within my mastermind, some things I wasn't showing up like that leader because I was just wiped out on my personal life, and that
Yeah.
ended up not serving me in that space.
Yeah. And you also do talk about a lot like owning your truth and like living your truth. To you,
Uh-huh.
what does that mean?
It means that I say I am who I am, whether no matter what room I'm in,
Mhm.
It's like letting go of that chameleon energy
Yeah.
and being willing to be like, "Hey," and that sometimes comes with some social anxiety, that comes with,
Yeah.
like, like, it's especially in a world where we wanna be successful, and it doesn't mean that's why I think I study successful people that are,
Mhm.
individuals, because it shows me like, "Oh, you can be an individual and be successful," You can be who you are and allow people, their own freedom and agency to decide what they think of you and if they like you versus being a chameleon and showing up in spaces and not being true to who you are.
Yeah. I think that's important, and I also like the like kind of like the shift of like where you were and where you are now and like able to embrace it too and be open about it because a lot of people wouldn't be or like you were saying at first when you came back to Utah you kind of felt like a lot of shame on you. Um how did you like kind of break free from like the shame, I guess? Because do you ever still hold it or is it like
Oh,
completely
totally.
gone? Okay.
No, yeah, for sure. Most recently, so I didn't share about my human trafficking story until I was like a year in with my now ex-husband. We were together for 5 years. So I had like this buffer of
Yeah.
my past and being back in Salt Lake and dating a little bit and that being out in the world, it definitely comes up now where I'm like, "Oh my god," you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because not everyone gets to sit eye to eye with me.
Mhm.
Not everyone gets to experience me. So, like, that's why I say, like, that message your message. So when I'm feeling shameful or like those moments of like, "Oh my god, like, what did I say there?" I just try to humanize and think like everybody has something. And like if I'm in my stuff, I can't be of service to somebody else. And I
Yeah.
just have to know like everybody has something, right? And
Yeah.
so if my shame is, if I'm living in my shame, I really can't be of service.
Mhm. No. I agree. So the last part of my podcast, I asked people on Instagram to ask you questions, and I picked two of my favorite ones. So the first one is, what's your favorite
Okay.
form of self-care?
It's probably still breath work, and my actual
Mhm.
favorite form of self-care is going to a nice, very nice restaurant by myself. Like, I'm my
I've
own favorite
never done
company.
that. I've never been able to go
Oh
to a
my
restaurant and eat by myself. I have, like,
stop.
such, like, anxiety around it, not because I'm,
It
like, stressed to be there, but it's like
Yeah,
my brain goes, "What are people gonna think of me sitting there by myself?" And I'm trying so hard to, like, break free of that, but I've
this
never
is
done
your
that, but I
sign.
want to.
This is your
Mhm.
sign.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, go sit at the bar somewhere. It's, like, less confronting than being at
Mhm.
like, a table by yourself, you know? So I love doing that. I love alone time, but yeah, still probably breath work.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Awesome. And then the last question is, do you have any tips for shifting your mindset when you're in a dark place?
Yeah, I do. So this year again was a really hard year for me. I
Mhm.
think things because I'm like the queen of gaslighting my own feelings
Yeah.
instead of just starting to be like this, and you have to be mindful, but like this is hard. And if this were to look better, what would it look like?
Mhm.
And what is one thing I can do? And that might just be brushing your teeth. That might just be like calling a friend and being like, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I had like a couple friends this year that just carried me and I'm like super independent. But I think the first thing is just really, really validating your feelings. Like, this is hard and it's normal for it to be hard. And if it were to look different, how would I want it to look? And like, is there anything I can do to get me towards that today?
Yeah.
Um, because I think also when we're going through hard times, we have a tendency to like make them worse by like, we should be doing this and I should be doing that. And that just only puts more overwhelm and pressure on your nervous system
Mhm.
versus like validating and then taking baby steps to get you out of that.
Yeah. No, 100% I agree. Well, that's all I had for you today. So thank you so
Oh
much
my
again
gosh.
for coming on and sharing your story with everyone. Before you leave, do you want to shout out any of your socials where we can find you, where they can work with you, where they can hear more of your
Totally.
story?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me, Instagram is like my main place you can find me. And it's _Sophie Jones. So come there, drop me a DM. I have typically different little offers. I'm going to launch an offer at the beginning of January. It's the first thing I've launched in like 5 months, and I'm super excited about it. And it's going to start super low. So if you've listened to this and you're like, oh, I'm interested in what it's like to be in her world, that would
Mhm.
be something you maybe want to come check out if this show gets out there in time. And if not, I always have things that I'm running that I'm excited about. If you have gone through something similar and you just want to be seen, heard, or have a like minded ally and friend in your corner, drop me a DM. I'd love to be that for you. And you can also check out my website. It's Sophie Jones and then SC for Sacred Coaching. So sophiejonessc.com. And that's where you can find me in the World Wide Web.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. I really do hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to go follow Sophie on all her socials. Go show her some love, go show her some support. Perhaps you might need a mindset or business coach, so hire her if you want. If you want to follow me, please don't be shy. You can follow me either at Behind the Girl Boss or at It's Amanda Wan. You can check out my YouTube channel, It's Amanda Wan, where these videos are actually going to be on, along with Spotify. I post every single week on YouTube, either a vlog, a sit down video, whatever it may be. Don't forget to follow or subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it on. Leave a review, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye, guys.